My name is Leah, and I have narcolepsy. But not the normal kind. Mine is triggered by strong emotions. A good laugh, and I'm out cold. A surge of anger, and I hit the floor. Any intense feeling, and I'm instantly asleep. As a result, I've learned to live my life with a poker face. The day I was reunited with my birth parents, they pointed to my new sister, a girl with dark, haunted circles under her eyes, and said, her name is Claire. She has severe insomnia. You need to be quiet. Don't disturb her. I looked at her, my face a perfect blank mask, and thought, that's rough. The next thing I knew, that single flicker of pity sent me plunging into darkness. When I came to, my sister was asleep beside me, for the first time in 3 years. After that, to help her sleep, I had to spend my days trying my best to get angry, laugh my head off, and feel sorry for her. 1. I was just picking myself up off the pavement, brought down by a punchline I'd overheard from a passing car, when a middle-aged couple who claimed to be my biological parents found me. You've been out there on your own for 19 years, the woman said, her eyes red-rimmed and her expression heavy with guilt. You must have suffered so much. I couldn't afford to empathize. One pang of sympathy and I'd be on the ground again. So I just asked, deadpan, and? The man, Robert Jensen, took a deep breath. We want to bring you home. But there's your sister, Claire. She's been unwell since she was a child, and we want to keep her with us. The long-lost daughter and the replacement. Great. A wave of annoyance washed over me. I hated complications. I turned to leave. No, thanks. The woman, Carol, grabbed my arm, her voice softening. Leah. Oh. Her name is Claire. She has crippling insomnia. She goes nights, sometimes weeks, without sleeping. It's destroying her. Severe insomnia? How awful would that be? I could never get enough sleep. She couldn't get any. It was almost. A thought flickered through my mind. How tragic. And just like that. Thump. The world went black. That fleeting moment of compassion had knocked me out cold. I woke up in the plush leather backseat of a luxury SUV. Seeing my eyes open, Carol grabbed her husband's arm. She's awake, Leah, right after you fainted. Claire fell asleep right beside you. It's the first time in 3 years we've seen her sleep so peacefully. Robert met my gaze in the rearview mirror, his expression a mix of awe and calculation. The doctors think your narcolepsy and her insomnia might be connected in a way they don't understand. So, we have to take you home. I got it. I wasn't just the long-lost daughter. I was a walking, talking Ambien. The house, more of a mansion, really, was enormous, with a full staff of housekeepers and a butler waiting at the door. Carol's first question was breathless. Is Claire awake yet? The housekeeper was beaming. Miss Claire just woke up. She seems much more rested. Carol let out a long sigh of relief, the smile on her face undeniable. She looked at me with a fiery intensity, as if I were a priceless artifact. At dinner, I finally met her, Claire Jensen. She was so thin she looked translucent, the skin under her eyes a deep, bruised purple. She was like a wisp of smoke that a strong breeze could just blow away. She sat next to me, her gaze vacant, not reacting at all as her parents introduced us. It was like she had muted the entire world. The tense, overly cautious atmosphere in the room was making me drowsy. I couldn't help it. A purely physical yawn escaped. The effect was instantaneous and bizarre. Across the table, Claire's body jolted. Her eyelids drooped heavily for a second, and the rigid line of her shoulders seemed to soften. Robert and Carol exchanged a look of pure astonishment. The irritation I'd been feeling strangely melted away. I finished my meal with a surprising sense of satisfaction. A feeling of warm contentment spread through me, and I felt the corners of my mouth begin to lift. I knew it was coming. I dug my nails into my thigh, trying to force the smile down, but the wave of sleepiness was already crashing over me. I managed to stay upright, but my head started bobbing, my eyes struggling to stay open. Beside me, Claire, who had been absently pushing food around her plate, went still. She turned her head slightly, her gaze focusing for the first time on me. Her empty eyes suddenly had a flicker of life in them, like a desert traveler spotting an oasis. Tired? Where's my room? I mumbled, unable to hold on any longer. As I walked away, I could feel her eyes glued to my back until I disappeared around the top of the grand staircase. 2. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of muffled, desperate crying and things smashing against a wall. It was coming from the room next door. In the hallway, Robert and Carol were pounding on a locked door. Claire! Claire, open the door. When Carol saw me, she looked like she was grabbing a lifeline. Leah! Claire! She's having another episode. She's locked herself in. The crying from inside the room was like a drill boring into my skull. It was grating, messy, and loud. A hot flash of anger shot through me. I couldn't stand this kind of melodrama. I was furious. Furious that she'd woken me up, furious that these parents were just flapping their hands uselessly. As the rage peaked, the familiar vertigo hit me. My vision went dark, and with a loud thud, my body pitched forward, collapsing against her bedroom door. The crying inside stopped instantly. I don't know how much time passed, but I was shaken awake to see 3 faces staring down at me. Robert, Carol, Anne, Claire. She stood in her open doorway, hair a mess, tear tracks still wet on her cheeks. But her eyes were fixed on me. Not vacant anymore. They were analytical, searching, with a hint of something I couldn't place. A kind of hunger. Carol helped me up, her voice trembling. The second you fell, it went silent. We used the master key, and she was asleep again, in her lounge chair. Robert looked at me like I was a scientific miracle. Leah, it seems you really are Claire's medicine. I rubbed the back of my head where it had hit the doorframe, my face impassive. So, I wasn't just Ambien. I was a fast-acting sedative. Claire stepped out of her room and stood in front of me. She was taller than me, but painfully thin. She studied me for a long moment, then forced out 2 words, her voice raspy and dry. Do it again. Excuse me, you want me to perform my fainting act again? She must have seen my confusion, because she added another word, so quiet it was like a feather brushing my ear. Angry. I understood. She wanted me to get angry again, so she could get some more sleep. Looking at the red veins in her eyes and the sheer fragility of her, the anger I'd felt earlier just evaporated. Whatever. The girl was desperate. I tried to summon the emotion, to dredge up the irritation. I glared at her and said through gritted teeth, You woke me up. It worked. The tidal wave of sleepiness crashed down. Right before I blacked out, I saw Claire's eyes light up, and I could have sworn the corner of her mouth twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. Then, beside me, she slowly, peacefully, closed her eyes. From that day on, my life was completely appended. It was like Claire had latched onto me. She started curating lists of stand-up comedy specials for me on Netflix. She downloaded the most heart-wrenching dramas onto a hard drive and left it on my desk. She even started researching ways to piss me off. She'd put salt in my orange juice. She'd blast heavy metal right when I was about to drift off naturally. My days became a chaotic cycle of emotional whiplash and sudden unconsciousness. And Claire's health, you could see it improving daily. She started to fill out, and the light in her eyes grew steadily brighter. We were enrolled in the same elite private school. Claire sat in the front row, I sat in the back. But her eyes were always drifting back to me, with a sort of cautious, dependent look. After school one day, she slid a book across the library table. It was a collection of Mitch Hedberg's one-liners. For you. Mom said you need to. Smile more. Her eyes were filled with pure, unadulterated hope, as if she was just waiting for me to laugh myself into a coma so she could get a nice nap. I blankly pushed the book back at her. I don't need it. You do, she insisted, her voice stubborn. That familiar irritation started bubbling up. I whipped my head around to stare at her. What the hell do you want from me? I'm not your prescription. Leave me alone. My tone was harsh. She froze, stunned by my outburst. A second later, her eyes welled up, and fat, silent tears began rolling down her cheeks. The few remaining students in the library started looking over, whispering. My head was pounding. The fire inside me was instantly doused by her tears. I was annoyed, but also helpless. I pulled a tissue from my pocket and roughly shoved it into her hand. Fine, fine, stop crying. I'll take the stupid book, okay? She sniffled, her crying subsiding. Okay, she mumbled, then asked in a small voice, so. When are you going to laugh? I almost choked. I forced my face into a twisted smile that looked more like a grimace. I'm laughing right now, I snarled. Laughing at what a pain in the ass you are. And with that, the world vanished. For the second time, it was anger, born from a fake smile, that took me offline. Just before I collapsed, I saw Claire catch me, a look of profound relief and satisfaction spreading across her face. My sleep sync rate with Claire got higher and higher. When I was asleep, she could sleep. When I was awake, she was wide awake. We had become a bizarre, symbiotic organism. To ensure she could get a full night's rest, I started to methodically schedule my emotions. At 9 p.m. sharp, I'd watch a tearjerker to make myself pass out from sadness, or read a book of terrible puns to knock myself out laughing. She, in turn, became my emotion supplier, constantly feeding me new material. Our relationship grew into something strange. We weren't like sisters. We were more like war buddies, fighting the same impossible battle. Her art started to change, too. The dark, depressing charcoal sketches were replaced by bright, warm watercolors. She painted me a lot. Me sleeping, me staring into space. Every portrait felt like it was seen through a lens of gentle affection. One night, I was in a deep funk. I couldn't summon any strong emotion at all. Predictably, Claire was up all night. I saw a piece of paper slide under my door. On it, in her elegant handwriting, was a note, Elia, I'll tell you a joke. A guy is fishing, and he catches a squid. The squid says, please, let me go. The guy says, okay, but first I have to quiz you. The squid says, okay, quiz me. So the guy cooked him. Staring at the awful, cheesy dad joke, a real laugh bubbled up out of me. It wasn't a laugh for the sake of sleeping. It was a genuine, light-hearted chuckle. It was quiet, but it was enough to flip the switch. My vision went dark, and I slumped onto the rug. From the hallway, I heard Claire let out a soft sigh of relief, followed by the sound of her leaning against the door, her breathing slowly evening out. In that moment, lying on the cold floor, I felt incredibly warm. So this is what it felt like to be needed. On graduation day, Claire was chosen as the valedictorian. As she spoke, one of her paintings was projected onto the giant screen behind her. It showed a girl sleeping peacefully in bed, while another sat beside her, sketching quietly by the light of the moon. She wore a white dress, her cheeks were rosy, and her voice was calm and clear as it filled the auditorium. I call this piece symbiosis. For a long time, I thought the night was my prison, and insomnia was my curse. Then, my sister came into my life. She turned to look in my direction, her eyes shining. She traded her consciousness for my peace. She filled my world with her emotions. Thank you, Lear. Thank you for coming into my life and being my guardian. The audience erupted in applause. I sat in the back row, watching her on stage, and an overwhelming wave of pride and joy surged through my chest. I looked at her, and I smiled. A real, genuine, beaming smile. And then, I felt the familiar dizzy spell. Just before I lost consciousness, I saw Claire smile back at me. I could read her lips as she silently formed the words, "A good night." I slumped down in my seat, and slept deeper than I ever had before. When I woke up, however, I was in a completely different place. The walls were sterile white. The air smelled of antiseptic. And a cold, metal clamp was locked around my wrist. Robert and Carol Jensen stood by my bed, their expressions colder and flatter than I had ever seen. Robert spoke first, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Lear, Claire's insomnia is cured." Carol's face was twisted with a look of disgust. "We brought you here for one reason, to fix Claire. Now that the medicine has done its job, it's about to expire." Before I could process the shock, several people in lab coats walked in, one holding a large syringe. The man in the lead spoke in a monotone. "Mr. and Mrs. Jensen, the test subject Lear's emotional responses have stabilized. We can now proceed with the final severance procedure. Once the surgery is complete, her narcoleptic condition will be fully transferred to a new host. And she, he said, gesturing to me, will permanently lose the ability to feel any emotion. She will become, for all intents and purposes, a vegetable." The glint of the needle was blinding. Fear, cold as ice water, shot through my veins. I tried to struggle, but the metal cuff holding my wrist to the gurney didn't budge. They'd injected me with something. My limbs felt heavy and useless, too weak to even summon a flicker of emotion. "No." The sound that escaped my throat was barely a whisper. Carol stood nearby, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a piece of used furniture. "Don't worry, it won't hurt for long. Soon, Claire will be completely free from her insomnia, able to live a normal life. This is what you should do for her. As her sister." Robert added, "It's the only value you have left." Value. Medicine. A tool. The words echoed in my head. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the familiar vertigo wouldn't come. "Why?" I asked, clinging to one last shred of hope. "Aren't I your daughter, the one you were looking for?" No one answered me. The doctor just raised the syringe and stepped closer. Just as the needle was about to pierce my skin. "Warning, warning, unknown intrusion detected." A piercing alarm shattered the dead silence of the white room. Red lights flashed wildly, casting stark shadows across everyone's faces. Robert's face contorted in fury. What's going on? The doctor froze, looking nervously toward the door. Crash! The lab door was smashed open by an incredible force. The figure who burst in made my whole body jolt. It was Claire. Her face was pale, she was breathing in ragged gasps, and in her hands she was holding a bright red fire extinguisher. Don't you dare touch her. Her voice was no longer soft and feathery. It was raw, ragged, and utterly desperate. Carol shrieked. Claire! Are you insane? What are you doing here? I'm getting her out. Claire's eyes scanned the room, landing on me, on the cuff on my wrist, on the syringe at my neck. The light in her eyes was instantly swallowed by a tsunami of rage. Without a moment's hesitation, she lifted the fire extinguisher and swung it with all her might into the side of a massive, glowing blue machine, the most expensive-looking piece of equipment in the room. Crackle, pop, sparks flew. The machine let out a dying whine, and its screens went black. My dater, the lead doctor, screamed in agony. Robert was shaking with rage. You ungrateful! Get her! Restrain her! 2 lab techs lunged at Claire. She was faster. She pulled the pin on the extinguisher and blasted them with a thick cloud of white powder. Cough! Cough! Using the chaos as cover, she rushed to my side. She slammed the base of the heavy extinguisher against the metal cuff on my wrist. Clang! Clang! Sparks flew. The shock of the impact vibrated up my entire arm. Leah, let's go, as she yelled, her eyes blazing red. My mind was a complete blank. My body wouldn't respond. Seeing me frozen, she grabbed the front of my gown, her face a mask of frustration and fear. You hate me, right? You hate being my sleeping pill? Here's your chance. Get up and run. Her words were like a drill, boring through the fog in my brain. She was right. I hated being a tool. I hated this life that had been forced on me. A familiar fire started in my gut, roaring up into my head. The world began to spin. No. Not now. I can't sleep now. I bit down on my tongue, hard. The taste of blood filled my mouth. The sharp pain kept me anchored to consciousness. Don't fall asleep, Claire's voice pleaded, choked with tears. Please, not this time. If you fall asleep, we're both finished. Crack! The metal cuff finally broke. She grabbed my hand, her palm cold and sweaty. Go! We bolted from the lab, Robert's furious roar echoing behind us. Stop them. I don't care how you do it. We spent 2 days hiding in a windowless room at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with the smell of damp mildew and instant ramen. Claire was in bad shape. She hadn't slept a wink, and the dark circles under her eyes were even worse than when I'd first met her. She had withdrawn all the cash from her savings account. A thick wad of bills on the nightstand was all we had. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her light a cigarette with trembling hands. She never used to smoke. You knew all along, didn't you? I asked, my voice hoarse. She took a drag and immediately started coughing, so hard it brought tears to her eyes. Yeah. On graduation day. I overheard them in the study, on the phone. Her voice was so fragile, it felt like it could shatter at any moment. They said their efficacy was stable, and the severance could be performed at any time. They said they'd already found a new host for you. An orphan, perfectly healthy. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. So you. I pretended I didn't know anything. She managed a smile that was more painful than a grimace. I pretended I was cured. I went to bed on time every night, acted happy. It was the only way to make them lower their guard, to let me go to graduation. It was the only way I'd have a chance. A chance to save me. She had put on a performance for my sake. I looked at her trembling fingers, at her eyes, bloodshot and wide with exhaustion. Insomnia was eating her alive. An indescribable emotion washed over me. Guilt, pity, something else. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that the familiar, overwhelming sleepiness was coming back, stronger than ever before. My eyelids felt like lead weights. Leah. Claire suddenly stubbed out her cigarette. She grabbed my face with both hands, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were a mess of red veins, but they burned with a terrifying intensity. Look at me, Leah. This isn't your time to sleep. It's supposed to be mine. But if you pass out now, we lose everything. She enunciated every word with grim purpose. She was right. If I slept, she would get relief. But they would find us. It was a checkmate. My consciousness was sinking. Her face was blurring in front of me. Just as the world was about to fade to black, the motel room door was kicked off its hinges. Several large men in black suits filled the doorway. The man in front, I recognized him. He was the Jensen's driver. He looked at us with a blank expression, the way you'd look at two pets that had escaped their cage. Miss Claire, Miss Leah. Mr. Jensen wants you to come home. Claire shoved me behind her, her body as tense as a drawn bowstring. Get out. The men behind the driver swarmed in. Fighting was useless. We were roughly forced into a car and driven back to that gilded prison. This time, there were no fake smiles to greet us. In the living room, Robert sat on the sofa, his face so dark it looked like it was about to rain. Carol rushed forward and slapped Claire across the face. Smack! The sound was sharp and loud. A red handprint immediately appeared on Claire's cheek. You ungrateful brat, we gave you everything, we raised you for 19 years, and you betray us for an outsider? Carol's voice was a shrill shriek. Claire clutched her cheek, her gaze defiant. She's not an outsider. She's your daughter. I have no daughter like that. Carol pointed a trembling finger at me. I only have one daughter, and you almost ruined her. Robert stood up, looking down on us from his full height. His eyes were colder than the metal cuff in the lab. From now on, neither of you will have a moment's peace. We were locked in separate rooms on the second floor, the doors bolted from the outside. Once a day, a tray with a single meal was left on the floor. The real torture began at night. They wheeled a large TV into my room and played a constant loop of the cringiest stand-up comedy specials. I tried to keep a straight face, but my body's reactions were involuntary. After one uncontrollable burst of laughter, I passed out, my body hitting the cold hardwood floor with a thud. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up shivering from the cold. From the room next door, I could hear Claire's muffled, agonized sobs. And from the hallway, I heard Carol's triumphant voice. Do you hear that, Claire? Your medicine is right next door, sleeping so soundly. It's a shame, isn't it, that you can't? Beg me, Claire. If you beg me, maybe I'll let her come in and keep you company. I scrambled to the door, my nails scraping against the wood. Let me out of here, E. The only response was the sound of their footsteps fading down the hall, punctuated by their quiet, satisfied laughter. They had turned my condition into their instrument of torture. 6. We were birds in a cage. Claire's condition deteriorated rapidly. The prolonged sleep deprivation was causing hallucinations. I'd often hear her crying softly or talking to herself in the middle of the night. My own body grew weak from hunger and stress. My emotional threshold became higher. It was getting harder and harder to trigger a collapse. Ironically, it became a form of self-preservation. We found a way to talk. We tapped on the shared wall, using Morse code for simple messages. I tapped it first. She responded almost immediately. We devised a system. 5 minutes after the housekeeper left our food trays, would slide notes under our doors and use a long, thin rod I'd broken off the bed frame to hook the other's note and pull it across. The first note came from her. Her elegant handwriting was shaky and distorted. They put a camera in my room. 24/7 surveillance. They like to watch me when I can't sleep. My suffering is their entertainment. My stomach dropped. I wrote back, they force me to watch comedies. I fall on the floor. No one comes. Her reply came quickly. Don't laugh. Leah, don't cry, don't get angry. Don't give them any emotion. We can't let them win. Don't give them any emotion. I started practicing how to empty my mind, to turn myself into a true blank slate, an empty shell. It was harder than enduring the hunger and the cold. One night, a loud bang echoed from her room, like something heavy had fallen. It was followed by a terrifying silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I threw myself against the door, screaming. Claire! Claire, what happened? A guard in the hallway barked at me. Shut up. You make another sound and you don't eat tomorrow. I ignored him, slamming my body against the door with all my strength until my shoulder popped out of its socket and I collapsed in a heap of pain. I didn't sleep a second that night. The next day, Carol came. She was wearing an expensive silk robe, her makeup perfect. She looked down at my pathetic state on the floor, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. Claire tried to kill herself. Smashed her head against the wall. My head snapped up. Such a shame, as she continued slowly, savoring the look of horror on my face. She didn't succeed. Just a nasty gash on her forehead, a minor concussion. The doctor said she needs to rest. A fire unlike any I had ever felt ignited at the base of my spine and shot straight into my brain. It wasn't the hot, dizzying rage that made me pass out. This was cold. It was a glacial, Arctic cold that froze everything in its path. I slowly, painfully, got to my feet and walked until I was standing right in front of her. My narcolepsy didn't trigger. I was more awake than I had ever been in my life. I looked at her perfectly preserved face and said, one word at a time, you are going to regret this. Her smile froze. She seemed genuinely startled by something she saw in my eyes. Are you threatening me? This isn't a threat, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's a forecast. In that moment, I felt something inside me break. And something else, in its place, harden into steel. It was as if the switch for my narcolepsy had been frozen solid by this icy hatred, no longer able to be flipped so easily. I didn't need to escape into sleep anymore. I needed to be awake. I needed to watch, with my own 2 eyes, as they walked themselves into hell. 7. They made a fatal mistake. A few days later, in what they considered a stroke of genius for psychological torture, they moved a semi-conscious Claire back into her old room. Right next to mine. They thought that letting us hear each other's breathing, but never touch, was the ultimate torment. They didn't realize they were giving us an opportunity. Leah. Late that night, her weak voice drifted through the air vent that connected our walls. I'm here. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. My laptop. The study. Or, my laptop. Oh, she said, her words broken and faint. The hard drive. It's encrypted. They can't get into it. What's on it? Everything. All the proof. Her voice, though weak, held a shocking amount of strength. The company's forged account books, records of their tax evasion. And the data from that illegal lab. They weren't just studying us. They were using homeless people for other experiments. A chill went down my spine. What were they trying to do? Sell it, as she breathed. They want to sell their emotional transfer technology. We were just their first successful case. They want to mass-produce medicine. And the patients who need it. It was a grotesque, bloody supply chain. And Claire and I were just the flawless products in their showroom. I hit a backup, Claire whispered, her voice even lower. A flash drive. It's behind the frame of the Van Gogh print. The Starry Night. In the study. We have to get it out. A meticulous plan began to form in our minds. We needed a massive diversion. Something chaotic enough to draw the attention of every single guard and staff member in the house. Something that would give Claire at least a 3-minute window to act. And the person who created that chaos could only be me. I need to trigger the most intense emotional outburst possible, I said into the vent. Something that brings all of them running to my room. How? I'm going to ignite every emotion I have. Joy, anger, grief, love, all at the exact same moment. It was incredibly dangerous. I had no idea what it would do to my body. It might kill me. But it was our only way out. I'll help you, Claire's voice came back, absolutely resolute. Get ready, I said. The moment I go down, that's when you move. We waited. The opportunity came 3 nights later. Robert had just closed a huge business deal and was in an unusually good mood. For the first time in weeks, he had us both brought down to the dining room for dinner. He and Carol sat at the head of the table, while Claire and I were placed at the far end, like 2 prisoners at their own parole hearing. The table was covered in lavish dishes, but in front of us were 2 bowls of plain oatmeal. Robert held up his wine glass, radiating smug success. You see, Claire, Dad's almost there. Once our technology hits the market, the whole world will go crazy for it. Then, whatever you want, I'll get it for you. Carol chimed in with a smile. That's right, sweetie. Don't be mad at us. Everything we've done has been for this family. For you. Claire kept her head down, her face hidden. I knew this was it. The time was now. I looked at her. She raised her head and gave me the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. Showtime. Claire put down her spoon. She lifted her head, and for the first time, spoke voluntarily. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to every person at the table. Leah, do you remember that awful squid joke I told you? I froze. The note under the door. The punchline, so the guy cooked him. The night I had laughed, genuinely laughed. A tiny bit of warmth began to melt the ice around my heart. My lips twitched, fighting a smile. Joy. Robert and Carol frowned, confused by the non sequitur. Claire didn't stop. She turned to Robert, her eyes calm. Dad, do you remember when I was 10? My painting won the silver medal in the citywide youth competition. When you came home, you looked at it and said, why wasn't it gold? The Jensens don't lose. Robert's expression stiffened. The warmth in my chest was instantly replaced by a sharp, cold sting. I could feel her decade-old humiliation and disappointment as if it were my own. The pain of never being good enough. Anger. Then, she looked at Carol. "Mom, do you remember the night you found out Lear existed? You pointed at me and screamed that I didn't deserve the Jensen name, that the sight of me made you sick." Carol's face went pale. An immense wave of grief crashed over me, suffocating me. To be blamed for a crime you didn't commit, to carry that guilt for 19 years. Sorrow. Finally, she looked at me. The dining room was dead silent, the only sound her own shaky breathing. Her eyes were shimmering with tears, but not a single one fell. Her voice was as soft as a secret. "Lear, did you know? I never had insomnia." Boom. My brain exploded. What? Robert and Carol shot to their feet, their faces masks of disbelief. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Claire ignored them. Her eyes were locked on me, as if she were trying to peel back her own soul for me to see. It was never clinical. It was anxiety. Terror. The terror of living in this house every night, afraid I was about to be thrown out. The terror of knowing I was just a placeholder, and the real owner could come back at any moment. I couldn't sleep because I was too scared to. The only time. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and a tear finally escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. "The only time I could relax was when I saw you collapse. When I saw you, more miserable, more out of control than I was. Only then could that knot in my stomach loosen, just a little. Only then could I lie to myself that I was safe. Only then. Could I sleep?" So that was it. There was no mysterious psychic connection. It was just the brutal psychological effect of one traumatized girl using another's suffering to find a moment of peace. This house, this family, had turned us both into monsters. Pity, rage, shock, betrayal, gratitude, absurdity, heartbreak. 1,000 conflicting emotions collided inside my chest, ripping and tearing and exploding. They merged into an indescribable, unstoppable torrent. I looked at the two panicked faces across the table. I looked at the weeping girl beside me. And suddenly, I wanted to laugh. Har. Har har har. Har 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 har. I started laughing, a wild, unhinged sound that bent me over in my chair. Tears streamed down my face. The laughter grew louder, more frantic, until it cracked and broke into a piercing, agonized sob. My vision didn't go black. It exploded into a searing, blinding white light. It felt like a million needles were being driven into my brain at once. I heard a scream. It wasn't mine. It was Carol's. In the exact same instant that my body fell backward, Robert Jensen, on the other side of the table, clutched his head and collapsed, stiff as a board. Carol let out an inhuman shriek, her hands clawing at the air before she too crumpled to the floor, convulsing, foam bubbling at her lips. The entire world fell silent. The blinding white light didn't put me to sleep. It felt like a scalpel, cleanly severing something deep inside me. I was lying on the floor, but my mind was crystal clear. I watched as Claire, the only one left standing, stared in shock for a single second. Then, without a shred of hesitation, she turned and sprinted toward the study. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital. Not the white hell from before, but a real hospital that smelled of antiseptic and was filled with sunlight. There was no metal cuff on my wrist, just the tape from an 4 drip. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm on my skin. I wiggled my fingers, feeling the texture of the starchy sheets. "Leah?" A voice came from beside me. I turned my head and saw Claire. She had been dozing in a chair next to my bed. Her face was tired, but her eyes, the eyes that had once been clouded by fear and exhaustion, were clear and bright. "You're awake," as she said, a small, tired smile spreading across her face. "How long was I out?" 3 days. She poured me a glass of water. "What happened to me that night?" I asked. "Not just you. Us," as she said softly. "It was them. That severance procedure. It wasn't a transfer. They lied." My grip on the glass tightened. "They implanted some kind of biometric chip in me, in you, and even in themselves. They were trying to create an emotional network. They wanted to turn you into an emotional broadcast tower, and then they could selectively tune into your feelings. They could receive your joy, for example, while filtering out your pain. They wanted to live in a state of permanent, manufactured happiness and energy." A wave of nausea washed over me. But they underestimated the power of real emotion. Claire looked at me, her expression complex. "Your emotional overload that night was too strong. It completely fried the cheap, unstable network they built. You were essentially an EMP. You blew the whole system, and in the process, you permanently burned out the connection between all of us." A doctor in a white coat came in. He checked my chart, nodded, and then looked at me. "Miss Hayes, your narcolepsy. From every physiological metric we can measure, it's completely gone." I stared at him. I thought of something funny. I thought of the squid joke. A small laugh escaped my lips. There was no dizziness. No darkness. Just a simple, easy laugh. I was cured? What about them? I asked. A strange look passed over the doctor's face. "Mr. and Mrs. Jensen's condition is complicated. They're in this hospital, in the ICU, next door." Claire took my hand and led me into the hallway, to the large observation window of the next room. I saw Robert and Carol. They were lying in hospital beds, pale and still. As I watched, Robert's eyes fluttered open. He looked around in confusion, and when he saw us standing outside the window, his face contorted into a mask of pure, venomous rage. He struggled to sit up, his mouth opening as if to scream a curse. But in the next second, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he fell back onto the pillow, fast asleep. A few moments later, Carol woke up. Her reaction was a mirror image of her husband's. She saw us, her face flooded with fury. She tried to move, and then she was asleep. "What is calmer?" Claire said, her voice perfectly calm. "When the network collapsed, it created a feedback loop. Your narcolepsy was transferred, but it was corrupted. It copied itself onto them in a much more extreme form. Now, any strong emotion, especially anger, greed, hatred, the things they feel most often, causes an immediate shutdown. They'll wake up, realize they've lost everything, and the rage will put them right back to sleep. Wake up, rage, sleep. Over and over. Forever. They had built their own perfect hell. They had become their own medicine. The flash drive Claire had retrieved was now in the hands of the police. The Jensen corporate empire crumbled overnight. The scandal of the illegal human trials was a national sensation. Everything they had ever valued, their reputation, their wealth, their power, was turning to ash while they slept, woke, and slept again. 6 months later, Claire and I rented a small, south-facing apartment. It had great light, perfect for the collection of succulents on our balcony. We used the portion of the Jensen seized assets that was legally awarded to me to start our new life. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than enough. Claire's anxiety was almost gone. She still woke up with a jolt sometimes in the middle of the night, but she wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. She would just pad into my room, see me sleeping like a log, and go back to her own bed, content. She started painting again. Her studio wasn't filled with black and white portraits of me anymore. It was filled with colorful landscapes, bustling city streets, and cats squinting in the sun. I enrolled in a local university, majoring in accounting. My advisor said it was a practical choice for finding a job. Life became wonderfully, beautifully boring. I got stressed about being late for class. I complained about the food in the cafeteria. I went to the movies and cried my eyes out at a sad film, right there in the theater with everyone else. I could finally feel everything a normal person feels, without the fear of collapsing at any moment. The feeling was, oh, indescribably good. One afternoon, Claire came out of her studio holding a freshly finished canvas. It was a painting of two girls from behind. They were holding hands, walking away from a massive, gloomy, black mansion. In the distance, on the horizon, the sun was just beginning to rise. Its light cast a golden glow around their silhouettes. I haven't thought of a title for it yet, as she said softly, looking at the painting. I looked at that rising sun, at the two figures walking toward the light. I thought for a moment, then smiled. Call it the awakening. She looked at me, surprised, and then her own face broke into a smile. It was the same one from graduation day, bright, brilliant, and full of life. Okay, she said. She reached out and playfully ruffled my hair. I liked that. Outside the window, the sun was warm and the breeze was gentle. We were awake now, both of us, in a brand new world. And it was good.